Claire Morgan sat alone in the emergency room at 1:53 in the morning, her left wrist wrapped in white gauze, the edge of the bandage so fresh it seemed to glow beneath the cold fluorescent lights overhead, while the smell of antiseptic mixed with stale coffee from the vending machine in the hallway made her nauseous in a slow, quiet way. She had fallen at the bottom of her own staircase after 3 weeks without enough sleep. Not a dramatic fall, not with a loud scream, not with much blood. Just the sound of her wrist bone striking the wooden step, her knee hitting the edge of the wall, the breath being knocked out of her lungs in a dark house where no one heard. Before that, she had taken her mother to a cardiology appointment on Monday morning, redone the prescription insurance paperwork for her stepfather Frank on Tuesday night, picked up her niece Sophie from volleyball practice on Wednesday because Melissa had a late meeting, sent Ryan $300 on Thursday after her brother said his apartment would lose electricity if he didn't pay the bill, then stayed up until nearly 1 in the morning on Friday to finish the quarterly report for the insurance company where she worked as an office manager, because David Harper, her boss, had reminded her that a regional manager position in Columbus was open, and he really wanted her to apply this time. She had meant to go to bed after sending the report. She had only gone downstairs to get a glass of water. She remembered clearly the way her foot slipped on the edge of the step, remembered the moment her body realized it no longer had enough strength to save itself, remembered lying on the floor staring up at the darkness above the stairs and thinking one strange thing. If she died here, tomorrow everyone would probably be angry because no one knew where her mother's appointment schedule was kept. After calling the ambulance herself, after the nurse asked whether any family member could come pick her up, Claire called Diane first. No answer. She called Melissa. Voicemail. She called Ryan. It rang 3 times, then stopped, which meant he had seen her name and rejected the call. She texted the family group, "I'm in the ER. Fell down the stairs. Can anyone come?" Melissa replied 17 minutes later, "Oh my God, are you okay? I have an early meeting tomorrow. I can't leave." Ryan didn't reply. Diane texted nearly an hour later, "I had already taken my sleeping pill, so I just saw this. Ask the nurse if they can call you a taxi. Don't forget I have my follow-up appointment Thursday." Frank only reacted to Diane's message with a thumbs up, as if her reminder about the appointment had settled the matter. Claire placed the phone face down on the plastic chair beside her because her wrist hurt every time she looked at the screen. But the phone lit up again, the white glow slipping through the gap between the chair and the device like an eye that refused to close. A new text from Ryan appeared. "Can you still send me $600 before tomorrow morning? I'm really stuck. If I don't pay, they're towing my car." Right below it, Diane added, "Remember to call and confirm my doctor's appointment before noon tomorrow. Last time they said you had to talk to the insurance people." And just when Claire thought nothing could make the situation more nakedly clear, a message from her Aunt Linda Hayes appeared, neat, polite, sharp as the edge of paper. "Your mother just called me. I know you're hurting, but don't make the whole family panic. When you feel better, remember to reassure your mother and help Ryan. The boy is at the end of his rope." Claire stared at the screen for a long time. She looked at the bandage around her wrist, at the bruise beginning to purple across her knee, at her sneakers dusted with stair dirt. And for the first time in her life, she did not answer right away. Not because she had suddenly become stronger in that moment, not because some voice inside her had finally declared enough. It was simply that some part of her was too tired to keep being the machine that responded whenever someone else pressed a button. The nurse walked over, a young blonde woman with her hair tied back, holding the discharge papers, and asked again, her voice gentler now, "Ms. Morgan, are you sure there's no one who can pick you up?" Claire opened her mouth, ready to say the old familiar sentence, "It's okay, I can handle it," but the words caught in her throat like a fishbone. In the end, she still managed to say them, because she had been trained her whole life to do so. "It's okay," she answered, her voice so hoarse she barely recognized it. "I can handle it." Claire had been handling things on her own since she was so young that the Morgan family no longer saw it as something sad, but as part of her personality. Diane often told neighbors that Claire had been an easy child. Not like Ryan, who screamed to be held, not like Melissa, who sulked over dresses and friends, but a baby you could set down in a crib, hand an old stuffed animal, and she would quietly entertain herself until the adults had time to remember her. When Claire was 8, her mother worked 2 shifts, one at a grocery store and one at a dental office. Her biological father had been gone long enough that his name existed only as a blank space on school forms, And Frank, back then, was just the man Diane was dating, the one who came over for dinner, fixed the faucet, watched TV, and id very little. Claire learned to stand on a chair to reach the spice cabinet, pour instant noodles into a pot, count the minutes the way her mother had taught her so they wouldn't turn mushy, then divide them into 3 bowls for Melissa, Ryan, and herself. In winter, the small kitchen in their suburban Ohio house always smelled of fake chicken broth, damp coats hanging near the heater, and stale cigarette smoke clinging to the curtains even though Diane tried to crack the window. Melissa was 3 years older than Claire, but fragile in a way she was allowed to be fragile. If Melissa cried because a girl at school hadn't invited her to a birthday party, Claire would sit beside her on the bedroom floor, hand her tissues, and listen to her repeat the same sentence for 40 minutes, even though Claire's math homework still wasn't done. Ryan was 4 years younger than Claire, and had been treated from the beginning like a storm that could not be blamed for being a storm. When Ryan forgot his homework, Claire let him copy hers. When Ryan broke a vase Diane loved, Claire said she had bumped into the table because Ryan had cried first. When their mother came home late, Claire bathed Ryan, combed his hair, reminded him to brush his teeth, and washed the dishes before Diane opened the door so their mother would not have to see how messy the house had become. Every time Diane would place a hand on Claire's head, let out a long breath like someone finally finding a chair, and say, "You're my strong girl. I don't know what I'd do without you." Claire lived on that sentence for years the way someone lives on stale bread, not good, not enough, but something you can chew to get through hunger. And if Diane was the one who handed out praise like sugar, Linda was the one who turned that praise into law. Linda, Diane's sister, did not live in the house, but she was present at every party, every funeral, every phone call after an argument, every time Diane cried because the children were hurting her. Aunt Linda never shouted. She wore clean cardigans, kept her hair neatly curled, wore pale pink lipstick, and spoke in the voice of a woman who always believed she was keeping the family from falling apart. When Claire was 11 and cried because she had to stay home watching Ryan instead of going to a friend's birthday party, Linda sat beside her on the front steps, handed her a tissue, and said, "You're smarter than other children, Claire. God gives some people broader shoulders because their family needs them to carry more." When Claire was 16 and wanted to go to an art camp, but Diane needed her home to help, Linda said, "Dreams don't run away, but your mother only has one Claire." When Claire was 24 and planned to move to Cincinnati for a better job, Linda called her privately and gently told her Diane had cried all night, that Ryan still wasn't steady, that Melissa was pregnant, that no one is forcing you to sacrifice, but good people understand when their family needs them. Linda was not the one who needed Claire to drive her to appointments or send money. She was more dangerous than that. She was the keeper of the Morgan family's moral scripture, the one who decided which sacrifices were noble, which refusals were selfish, which pain was allowed to be spoken aloud, and which pain had to be swallowed so Diane would not be upset. No one asked why a child had to be strong. No one asked whether she wanted to fall apart once and still have someone pick her up. Claire's maturity was not seen as a loss. It was praised, sanctified by Linda, leaned on by Diane, benefited from by Ryan, assumed by Melissa, and used by Frank as a service. She learned very early that if she needed less, if she was useful, if she anticipated her mother's exhaustion, Ryan's recklessness, Melissa's fragility, and Frank's silence, she would be kept inside the weak circle of praise. She did not think of it as an exchange. Children do not name invisible contracts. They only learn how to behave correctly enough not to be left outside the door. At 41, Claire owned a small house in the Ohio suburbs, a story and a half with a low porch, a gray doormat, a kitchen that was always clean because she cleaned even when she was tired, and a home office with filing cabinets labeled more carefully than any law office in town. Her job at the small insurance company was not glamorous, but she was good at it. She knew which clients would forget signatures, which employees needed a reminder 2 days before a deadline, which printer would jam if the paper was too thin, and how to speak to an angry man over the phone until he lowered his voice without realizing she had guided him out of his own rage. Her coworkers called her the pivot point. David Harper said she was the only person he could hand the office keys to, without worrying the building would be gone the next morning. Her family called her that too, but at home, the praise did not come with a salary, a title, or the right to take time off. A normal day in Claire's life was cut into so many pieces. She could no longer remember which part belonged to her. At 7:10, Frank called to ask if she had found the new car insurance form because he did not understand the website. At 8:25, Ryan texted, "Can you send me $80? Just until Friday, I swear." At 11:40, Diane called during Claire's lunch break to say the pharmacy wouldn't take her insurance, and Claire had to eat half a sandwich while staying on hold with the call center. At 3:15, Melissa texted, "Sophie gets out of volleyball at 4. I'm stuck at work. Can you pick her up? I know it's last minute, but I have no one else." Claire left the office early, made up the work at night, picked up Sophie, bought the girl a hot chocolate because it was raining, took Diane to get her medication, stopped by Ryan's place to sign an address confirmation form he said was just for the paperwork, then came home at 9:30 with a bag of cold food on the passenger seat. No one that day asked if Claire had eaten, if she had slept, if her report was finished, if her back still hurt from helping Melissa move the month before. They thanked her sometimes. Diane would say, "I know I can count on you." Melissa would send a red heart and the words, "You're my lifesaver." Ryan would send "You're the best" with a smiley face, right before disappearing until the next time he needed money. Frank would say if Diane reminded him, "Thanks, Claire." Linda rarely thanked her directly. She operated with more precision than that. She would call at the end of the day, after Diane had already told her Claire seemed a little tired, and say, "I know it's a lot, but in this family, you're the only one with a calm head. Don't let the others make you bitter, Claire. Your gift is knowing how to care. A gift." Claire had believed that once, but their thanks always felt like a receipt after service had already been rendered, while Linda's words were like a ribbon tied around the receipt to make it look like a greeting card. Claire used to think every family was like this. Every family had one person who remembered everything. Every family had one person who knew the utility passwords, the doctor's numbers, the insurance expiration dates, Diane's favorite cake, Ryan's allergies, Sophie's exam schedule, the name of Melissa's child's teacher, and where Frank kept the vehicle registration. She told herself she did it out of love, and most of that was true. The dangerous thing was not that she didn't love them. The dangerous thing was that she had used real love to explain a structure in which no one had to love her back with the same level of presence. Praise in the Morgan family always came in a soft shape, but the older Claire got, the more she felt it tighten around her wrist like rope. Sunday dinner at Diane's house was where those ropes were usually brought out, polished, and tied with one more knot. Diane lived in the old house after marrying Frank, the house with beige floral curtains, a glass cabinet full of dishes no one used, family photos hanging slightly crooked because Frank always said he would fix them and never did, and the dining table where Claire had sat since childhood in the same seat, the one closest to the kitchen so she could easily get up for more salt, water, napkins, gravy, or whatever else someone suddenly realized they needed. Diane liked to say, "Family comes first," whenever she set the bowl of mashed potatoes on the table, as if it were their family's private prayer, but the phrase only appeared when someone needed Claire to do something. Linda usually sat to Diane's right, like an unofficial advisor to the family throne, one hand resting on her glass of iced tea, eyes watching everyone. She was not merely present, she directed the emotional traffic. If Ryan arrived late, Linda would speak before anyone could criticize him. "He's trying, don't pile on him." If Melissa sighed because of the 2 children, Linda would say, "Being a mother now is harder than it was in our day." If Claire looked tired, Linda would study her for a moment and say just loudly enough for the whole table to hear. Claire carries everything, but strong people have to be careful not to let their hearts harden." It sounded like concern, but it laid a trap in advance. If Claire refused, it meant she had become hard-hearted. That night Ryan came late, his jacket wrinkled, hair uncombed, his face looking as though he had just woken up even though it was already 6 in the evening. Melissa looked at her brother with the irritation of someone who had built a harder life for herself, and still believed she had the right to judge someone who struggled in a different way. Frank sat at the head of the table, cutting his chicken into neat squares, silent as usual. Diane asked Ryan how things were going at the shop. Ryan pushed green beans around his plate with his fork and said in a half-joking, half-defensive voice, "Not great. They cut my hours. My manager's an asshole." Diane sighed. Melissa shook her head. Frank did not look up. Claire felt her body recognize what was coming before the question was said. Ryan added, still not looking directly at Claire, "I just need a little to get through this month. Not much, maybe 600. I'll pay it back when I get more shifts." The whole table went silent. No one said, "Claire, pay it for him." No one had to. The silence turned toward her like a spotlight. Claire set down her fork. In her mind, she saw the unpaid roof repair bill, the savings she had put aside for the old water heater that had started making a rattling sound, the email from David about the Columbus position she had not dared to open again. Diane looked at her with those familiar, tired eyes. "Claire, you know Ryan isn't good at managing these things," Melissa added, in the voice of someone trying to be fair. "He doesn't have anyone else to ask." Ryan frowned. "I'm not forcing her. If she doesn't want to, fine." That was his oldest hook, pretending to withdraw so the other person would seem cruel if they didn't pull him back. Linda set down her glass at just the right moment, lightly enough to seem accidental. "No one in this family should have to beg their own blood," she said. "But no one should forget either that there are seasons when God places one person in a position to help another." Claire heard herself say, "I'll send it to you tonight." Diane exhaled and patted her hand. "You really are this family's blessing." Ryan smiled immediately, relieved so quickly it hurt Claire. Melissa said, "You're always calmer about these things than I am. If it were me, I'd probably lose my mind." Linda smiled, like someone who had just seen order restored. Claire smiled, picked up her plate, and stood to clear the dishes. In the living room, they moved on to talking about the game and a TV show. Claire stood at the sink, the hot water reddening her hands, watching steam rise over the window glass until her face blurred in it. This family's blessing sounded like love, but that night, in the clatter of dishes, it began to sound like a sentence. Maya Ellis, Claire's coworker and one of her few true friends, was the first person who refused to let Claire's family stories pass as ordinary life. Maya worked in the claims department, with black shoulder-length hair and a voice so direct many clients feared her, though coworkers came to her when they needed the truth. She had no patience for systems that pretended to be love. One afternoon, Maya walked into the break room and found Claire asleep on the table, one hand around a cup of cold coffee, beside Diane's appointment sheet and a shopping list for Melissa. Maya stood there for a few seconds, then tapped lightly on the table. Claire startled so hard her wrist hit the cup. "I'm fine," she said immediately, before she even knew what Maya was asking. Maya pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "You say that like a knee-jerk reflex." Claire rubbed her face. "I just worked a little late last night." "For work, or because after work you're still the emergency hotline for your entire family?" Claire tried to laugh it off. "My family's just a little complicated." Maya did not laugh. "Every family is complicated, but not every family has one person turned into an electrical outlet everyone plugs into whenever they need power." Claire frowned. "They're not bad people. I didn't say they were. My mother has health issues. Melissa has 2 kids. Ryan really does struggle. Frank's getting older." Maya leaned back, looking at her the way she looked at a claim file with too many ignored pages. "You just defended every single one of them faster than you defend a customer in a dispute." Claire grew irritated. "Maya, you don't understand my family." "Maybe not, but I understand a person so tired she falls asleep at lunch and still thinks the first thing she has to do is protect the people making her tired." Claire looked down at her hand. Maya's voice softened, but not her point. "If they only call when they need something, that's not family. That's an emergency line." Claire's face went cold. "That's too harsh, maybe. But who takes care of you?" Claire did not answer. The question was so simple it felt rude. Who took care of her? Diane had called her strong. Melissa had called her organized. Ryan had called her the best when she sent money. Frank had called her good with paperwork. Linda had said she had been given the gift of care. But taking care of Claire was a different act. It required someone to remember that she had a body, limits, fears, cold dinners, nights when she stared at the ceiling wondering if she still knew how to rest. Claire stood, carried her cup to the sink, and said, "I have to get back to work." Maya did not stop her. She only said behind her, "A person who is always called strong is sometimes just someone no one has allowed to be weak." That sentence followed Claire the rest of the day like a sound that would not turn off. When Diane texted, "Remember to pick up my medicine. Melissa is busier than you." Claire stared at the words, "busier than you," for so long the screen went dark. The Columbus opportunity first arrived like a door cracked open, and Claire's first reaction was not joy but panic. David Harper called her into his office on a Thursday afternoon, when the sky outside the window had turned the gray color of coming snow. He was in his 50s, gray at the temples, with a habit of tapping his pen on the desk when he was thinking. But with Claire, he always spoke directly because he knew she hated being handled. "The regional manager position in Columbus has opened back up," he said, sliding a folder toward her. Higher salary, bigger team, better office. You should apply. Claire looked at the folder as if it belonged to someone else's life. I've never managed a region. You already manage half this company without the title. Don't pretend to be humble with me. She smiled weakly. Columbus is almost 2 hours away. I know how maps work. My family is here. David was quiet for a moment, not interrupting. Your family can use a phone. My mother has appointments. Frank doesn't understand insurance. My sister has 2 kids. My brother... She stopped, because she heard herself listing people like an administrative assistant reporting fixed assets. David took off his glasses and set them on the desk. Claire, I'm not asking out of curiosity. I'm asking because every year an opportunity gets near you, and every year you find a reason to leave it on someone else's doorstep. Claire felt her face grow hot. I can't just abandon everyone. I'm not telling you to abandon anyone. I'm saying you have the right to step toward a place where not everyone is tugging at your sleeve. That night, before she even opened the folder, Melissa called. Her sister's voice was thin and tense. Can you watch Sophie 3 days a week for the next 2 months? My new schedule is horrible. If I turn down these shifts, they'll think I'm not serious. Claire stood in the kitchen, the Columbus folder on the table, and heard herself ask, which 3 days? Then Ryan called, saying the car loan needed a reference. Not really a COSIN, just an address verification. Can you e-sign it for me? Otherwise, I can't get to work. Then Diane called, her voice sad. I heard your company might move you somewhere. You're not actually thinking of going, are you? I don't know who I'd count on if you were that far away. And 10 minutes later, Linda called, as if she had been notified by some silent bell system inside the family wall. Claire, I don't interfere with your work, she began, even though that sentence was already a kind of interference. But you need to understand timing. Some opportunities come back. Some people don't. Your mother is fragile. Melissa is overwhelmed. Ryan just needs a little stability. If you leave now, you'll make everyone think you chose yourself right when your family needed you most. Claire had not even said she wanted to go. She had not had the chance to say the word want to anyone, and yet that want had already been surrounded by needs, tears, concern, and morality before it had legs. That night, she opened David's email and closed it again. She told herself the position might not be the right fit. Columbus wasn't far, but it wasn't close. Her family needed her right now. There would be other opportunities later. But beneath all the reasonable explanations, there was a small, shameful truth. She was afraid that if she chose herself, everyone would look at her like a traitor. And because Claire had been loved for being useful for so long, she did not know who she was if no one needed her. Sophie, Melissa's 13-year-old daughter, said the sentence that changed the color of everything one rainy evening when Claire took her out to eat after volleyball practice. Sophie was a tall, awkward girl with hastily tied brown hair, the habit of pretending to be bored by adults, and yet she still let Claire buy her extra fries. The girl loved Claire in the real way children love the person who always shows up on time, brings an extra jacket, knows she hates onions, remembers the name of the cat in the book she read in 5th grade. That night, the two of them sat in a small diner with red vinyl booths and warm yellow lights while rain drifted outside. Sophie stirred her soda with a straw and said casually, Mom said Aunt Claire always says yes eventually. You just need to sound really stressed. Claire was cutting a pancake for her when her hand stopped. The knife touched the plate with a tiny sound. Sophie looked up and realized something was wrong. I didn't mean anything bad. Mom just said it. Claire looked at the girl's face, saw genuine confusion, saw a child repeating a map adults had drawn without understanding where it led. When did your mom say that? Yesterday, when I said maybe you were busy, because you had already taken Grandma to the doctor. Mom said you'd say yes if she sounded desperate enough. Sophie wrinkled her nose. Desperate means like really stressed, right? She was joking. Claire put down the knife. She wanted to say yes. Your mom was joking. Adults say things, don't think about it. She wanted to protect Melissa in front of her own daughter the way she had always protected everyone from the truth about themselves. But in Claire's mind, hundreds of phone calls suddenly lined up into a script. Ryan's drawn-out voice, Sis, I'm really stuck. Melissa's choked voice, I have no one else. Diane's opening line, I don't want to bother you, but Frank did not use a desperate voice. He simply handed her paperwork and silently waited for Claire to understand what she was supposed to do. Linda used a voice that did not need desperation, because she did not ask for specific tasks. She only reminded Claire that not doing them made her wrong. Claire had once believed every time was separate, An accident, a busy schedule, a shortfall, an illness, a family situation. But Sophie's sentence gathered them into a method. From that night on, Claire began writing things down. Not as revenge, not because she believed she would ever use it, simply because she needed somewhere to place the truth so it would stop dissolving into compassion. She opened a file on her laptop and first named it Family Notes, then deleted. She renamed it Things I Thought Were Love. The first column, date. The second, who called. The third, what they needed. The fourth, what Claire did. The fifth, cost in money or time. The sixth, what Linda said if Claire hesitated. The final column, did they ask if I was okay? The first line she entered was Ryan, $600 car. The final column stayed blank. The second line was Diane, doctor appointment, 3 hours of paid leave. The final column stayed blank. The third was Melissa, watching Sophie, 4 hours, bought dinner. The final column had a question mark because Sophie had hugged her. In the Linda column were sentences like, your mother only has one Claire. Don't let exhaustion make you lose your kindness. The adults in a family have to swallow their pride. Claire looked at that file in the dark home office, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, and felt she had done something both cruel and necessary. She had begun measuring love with data, not because she had stopped loving them, but because her feelings had been argued with for so long that she needed evidence that did not side. The first time Claire said no to Ryan happened near midnight, while the snow outside the window melted into wet streaks on the glass, and she sat with her wrist aching dully after a long day of typing. Ryan called twice. She watched his name appear, feeling the old pull in her chest, a mix of love, exhaustion, irritation, and obligation. On the third call, she answered. Ryan did not bother with much greeting. Sis, I need 600 before tomorrow morning. Otherwise, they're towing the car. I swear this time it's not my fault. The payment schedule changed. My shift money hasn't come in. The landlord's on me too. Claire closed her eyes. In her mind, she saw the file Things I Thought Were Love. 4 times that year, 3 times he had said, last time. Once he had paid back $50 and said that should count as starting to repay. No, she said. The word was so short that both of them went silent. Ryan laughed after a few seconds, but there was no humor in it. What? I can't send it. You have the money. That doesn't make it yours. Wow, he stretched the word into a verdict. You've changed. Claire looked at her hand. Maybe I have. I'm not asking so I can go party. I need the car to get to work. Then call the lender, ask for an extension, sell something, or find another way. Easy for you to say from your tidy little house. That hurt because it contained a piece of truth. Her house was tidy. Her account had emergency savings. Her life from the outside looked stable. But Ryan did not see the nights she had paid for that stability. I can't keep paying forever. Ryan went quiet, then his voice cooled. Fine, I'll remember this. The next morning, Diane called before Claire even reached the office. Ryan says you refused to help him. Claire stood by the door, half inside her coat. I can't keep paying for his car. He's your brother. You know he's not good at handling things. I know, but I'm not a bank. Diane sighed, the familiar sigh, the sigh that once made little Claire wash dishes faster. No one said you were a bank, but family is supposed to help when someone is struggling. An hour later, Melissa texted, I don't want to get involved, but you were kind of cold to Ryan. He's impulsive, but he's not bad. Frank did not text, but that evening Diane said Frank thought Claire should think more generously. Linda called while Claire was sitting in the office parking lot, her voice lowered like someone reading a prayer. I heard about Ryan. I'm not defending his irresponsibility, but you have to understand, Claire, in a house. When one person has built a strong foundation, that person has to keep the walls from cracking. If you start saying no to teach everyone a lesson, you become the one using money to control love. That sentence left Claire sitting frozen in her car. She was the one who had just been asked for money. Yet Linda had turned the story into Claire using money to control others. That was Linda's frightening gift, turning every boundary Claire set into an act of moral failure. No one asked why she said no. No one asked whether she was stretched thin, whether she was worried about the water heater, whether she was saving for Columbus. They simply reacted like a family machine that had discovered a crucial button, was no longer working, and the speed with which their voices changed made Claire understand something she did not want to understand. Their love could be warm when she agreed, but it had another face the moment she was no longer useful. The social framing began at the next family dinner, where Ryan turned himself into the victim with the practiced skill of someone who had been forgiven his whole life before he ever explained. and Linda turned everyone's scattered resentment into an orderly indictment. Diane made roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and apple pie. The kind of family dinner that seemed warm if you did not listen too closely to what was being said between the clink of knives and forks. Ryan arrived looking more tired than usual, sat down, and did not touch his food right away. Diane asked how his car was. Ryan laughed bitterly, eyes on his plate. Almost got towed. Luckily, Joey lent me some money. Not everyone turns their back when family needs them. Melissa glanced at Claire. Frank set his fork down slowly. Claire felt her throat go dry. Ryan, she said, don't make it sound like I left you on the side of the road. I'm just telling the truth. Diane looked at Claire with sadness rather than anger, which was worse. You know I don't want you two fighting. I'm not fighting. I just can't pay every time Ryan faces a consequence. Ryan leaned back. A consequence. Listen to you, so professional. You sound like I'm one of your fake insurance claims. Melissa set down her napkin. I just think it's strange because you were never like this before. The sentence landed on the table, light but deep. You were never like this before, meaning the acceptable version of Claire was the version who always said yes, always found a way, always swallowed her own portion so no one else had to see it. Frank finally spoke, his voice even. No one's forcing you to help, but family should know how to support each other when things get hard. Claire looked at him. Frank, last month I spent 6 hours fixing your insurance paperwork. You didn't ask if I had time. Frank frowned. That was different. I don't understand computers. Ryan doesn't understand bills. Melissa doesn't understand finding childcare. Mom doesn't understand calling insurance. Everything is different until it lands on me. Melissa flushed. You're lumping everything together to make yourself the victim. Maybe because everything really has landed together in my life. Diane placed a hand on her chest as if wounded. Claire, this is a family dinner. I don't understand why you have to make the atmosphere like this. Linda put her hand over Diane's, but her eyes stayed on Claire. You're tired, and I understand. But I have to say this. There is a kind of bitterness that easily disguises itself as fairness. Once you begin keeping accounts in your heart, love becomes bookkeeping. Claire heard the words, keeping accounts, and felt cold, because she really had begun keeping a record. Linda did not know about the file yet, but she knew exactly how to strike at Claire's shame before there was even evidence. After dinner, Claire washed dishes alone as always, but this time no one spoke to her from the kitchen. They sat in the living room with the TV low, Ryan talking about how good Joey had been to him, Diane sighing in waves, Melissa talking about how hard it was to raise children these days, and Linda saying loudly enough for Claire to hear, I hope the insurance job doesn't turn the girl's heart into a file folder. Claire washed each plate, placed it in the rack, and watched water run over her hands. She realized that if she said yes, she was called a blessing. If she said no, she became the person hurting the family. Both names kept her in the same position. Then came the emergency room night, not as an isolated accident, but as the natural result of a life worn down until her body had to do what her mouth had never dared to do. Stop. In the days before it happened, Claire had tried to prove to the whole world that she still had everything under control. She took Diane to the cardiologist in Cleveland because Diane said the doctor close to home doesn't listen to me as well when you're not there. Even though Claire's work schedule that day was packed tight, she called Frank's insurance because he had entered the wrong prescription code and then got transferred 4 times. She watched Sophie 2 evenings because Melissa said the babysitter had the flu, while Sophie grew quieter and quieter, looking at her phone and then at Claire like a child sensing adult trouble. She was not allowed to understand. She worked late at the office, so David would not see she was losing focus. She opened the Columbus application and closed it, opened and closed it again, like someone standing before an emergency exit but still turning back to check whether anyone else needed their coat. The night she fell, she did not cry on the floor. She lay still, nauseous from pain, and her first fear was not that she had broken her wrist, but that no one would take Diane to get her test results the next day. After the emergency room, after the messages from people who did not come but still needed her, Claire returned home by taxi at 4 in the morning, one hand holding a bag of medication, the other holding her discharge papers. The driver asked if anyone could help her inside. She said she didn't need help. She opened the door with her right hand, turned on the kitchen light, looked at the house so clean it felt cold, and placed her phone on the table as if setting down something dangerous. Ryan's message still had no answer. Diane texted again at 3:12. Are you home yet? Call me tomorrow. Melissa sent at 5:40. I saw the message while getting the kids breakfast. So scary. Can I stop by today? I need to work and Sophie has a bit of a stomachache. Linda sent at 6:03. I know you had a difficult night, but don't let one fall throw the whole family into chaos. When you have the energy, you should send everyone a softer message. Your mother is very easily hurt. Claire read that sentence as the sun was rising, her wrist throbbing with her heartbeat, and she laughed. The laugh was tiny, dry, joyless, almost not human. She was not a family member in pain. She was an interrupted service, and everyone was asking when the system would be back online. The journal Things I Thought Were Love became the crime scene of a life Claire had once called normal. The doctor gave her a few days off, and during those days, instead of watching TV or sleeping the way an injured person should, she sat at her desk, her wrist propped on a pillow, using her right hand to pull up bank statements, appointment confirmations, family group texts, and every saved bill in her cabinet. She did not work continuously. Sometimes she had to stand because her chest hurt. Sometimes she looked at a $250 transfer to Ryan from 2 years earlier and remembered that on that day, she had planned to buy herself a new winter coat, but wore the old one for another year instead. Sometimes she found 3 consecutive vacation days used for Diane's minor surgery, and then remembered that when Claire had a fever the following month, Diane had told her, "You're grown, just take some medicine and you'll be fine." She entered each line. Ryan, electric bill, $180, did not ask. Ryan, rent money, $500, paid back $0. Melissa watched Sophie and Eli 7 hours, bought pizza $32. She said, "You're an angel," did not ask. Diane, cardiology appointment 4. 5 hours of PTO. Mom said, "I couldn't do this without you," did not ask. Frank, car insurance, 3 hours on the phone. He said, "Good," did not ask. Linda called after Claire hesitated, reminded her, "Don't let bitterness become your character," did not ask. Christmas, Claire bought gifts for everyone. The whole family signed one card for Diane. Cost $614. No one remembered to pay her back. Thanksgiving, Claire cooked 8 dishes. Melissa brought a store-bought pie. Ryan slept on the sofa. Diane said, "Claire likes doing these things." Linda said, "She has the hands of a woman who tends a family." Claire stopped on that line for a long time. Did she like it? Yes, part of her had liked it. She liked the smell of butter in the mashed potatoes. Liked Sophie laughing as she licked frosting from a spoon. Liked Diane standing in the kitchen doorway saying the house smelled like a real holiday. But liking it did not mean she was not being used. A person can love setting the table and still ache from always being the one who cleans it after everyone leaves. The total amount of money over 3 years left her stunned. More than $18,000, not counting labor, gas, vacation days, credit card interest, the things she had not bought for herself, the weekends that had not belonged to her. But the final column was what made her collapse over the desk. Did they ask if I was okay? Most of it was blank. A few lines said Sophie asked. One line said Maya asked. One line said Elena asked. Not Diane. Not Ryan's. Melissa rarely, and when she did, it usually came attached to another request. Not Frank, not Linda, who spoke the most about Claire's heart, and had never asked whether that heart was still beating normally. Claire stared at the file until the words blurred, then closed the laptop. In the living room, the wall clock ticked steadily. She thought about a life where people called her strong, because it was cheaper than coming to hold her up. Elena Price, the elderly neighbor in the house next door, entered the story not as a savior, but as a mirror placed in the wrong spot. One Claire could no longer avoid. Elena was over 70, widowed, and lived alone in a small house with ivy climbing over the porch and pots of geraniums cared for as carefully as soldiers. She shoveled her own snow, drove herself to the store, changed her curtains in spring, and rejected pity with a smile so sharp no one dared try twice. One afternoon, Claire saw her standing on a chair to change the porch light and rushed over by reflex, even though her wrist was still bandaged. Elena glanced at the bandage. "You're running over here to rescue me while you look like you just lost a fight with a staircase." Claire felt embarrassed. "I just thought you might need help." "I do, but I also ask if you're sure before I hand you the bulb." The sentence was small but strained. Claire stood under the porch, holding the ladder while Elena changed the bulb. Afterward, Elena invited her in for tea. Her house smelled of old wood, lemon, and books. There were 2 cups on the kitchen table, not because she had known Claire would come, but because she said people who lived alone should always keep a second cup to remind themselves that loneliness did not have to become a locked door. When Elena asked what happened to her wrist, Claire gave a short answer, but Elena heard what was missing. "Family didn't come," Claire was silent. Eleanor did not pretend not to know. I used to be the Claire of my family, she said, stirring her tea slowly. My husband was sick for 10 years. My son always needed money. My daughter dropped the grandchildren off every weekend because I was home anyway. My siblings called when they needed someone to take care of our mother. Everyone said I had a big heart. Do you know what a big heart is when other people say it too often? Claire shook her head very slightly. Free storage, Claire looked at her. Eleanor smiled, not quite bitter, only tired in an old way. When I had hip surgery, everyone called asking where the papers were, what insurance we had, what the utility password was. No one asked if I was scared until the doctor did. I lay in that hospital bed and realized I had spent 60 years becoming the person everyone came to when they did not want to grow up. Claire felt her eyes burn, but she did not cry. Eleanor looked out the window, where the Ohio evening fell across the fence. Don't wait until you have no strength left to ask whose life you're living. The sentence did not save Claire. It did not transform her, but it placed a future in front of her so clearly she could no longer pretend it belonged to someone else. A woman praised for sacrifice until there was nothing left to give, then treated as inconvenient when she finally needed support. The Columbus opportunity returned at the moment Claire was weakest and most awake. David called her into his office after she returned to work, looked at her wrist, looked at the dark circles under her eyes, and said the position was still open because the top candidate had withdrawn. You have 3 days, he said. I won't push you, but I'm going to say this one more time. If you don't apply because you don't want it, I respect that. If you don't apply because your family needs a call center operator, I will be angry on your behalf. Claire took the folder home. This time, she did not tell her family. On Saturday, she drove to Columbus alone. On the passenger seat sat a printed map. Even though her phone had GPS, a hot coffee from a gas station, and a bag of cookies she had bought because no one had said what they wanted to eat. So for once she chose the flavor she liked. The road from the suburbs to Columbus was not especially beautiful, but to Claire it seemed unfamiliar enough to feel almost magnificent. Bare trees not yet leafed out, roads still whitened with salt after the snow, town signs, gas stations, trucks passing by. She viewed a small apartment near the new office, 2nd floor. The window overlooking a parking lot and a row of maple trees that would turn yellow in the fall. Kitchen was smaller than hers. The closet was not wide. The living room had room only for a sofa and a bookshelf. The realtor apologized a little about the size. Claire stood in the empty room and imagined a Wednesday night when no one called her to pick up medicine. A Saturday morning when no one texted, "Can you come watch the kids?" A hot dinner eaten while still hot because it belonged only to her. The thought made her want to cry from lightness, then immediately made her feel guilty for feeling light. She sat in the car after seeing the apartment, her hands on the steering wheel, watching strangers walk along the sidewalk, and realized she had been trained to treat her own desire like a small crime to be hidden. She wanted that job. She wanted the small apartment. She wanted not to measure vacation days by someone else's illness. She wanted to be called Claire before she was called reliable. Wanting that did not make her happy right away. It made her tremble. That evening when Diane called, Claire watched the phone ring 5 times before answering. Diane asked where she was. Claire said, "I went shopping." The small lie tasted bitter on her tongue like medicine, but she could not place the fragile thing she had just found in front of the whole family before it had skinned. The family found out before Claire could tell them herself, because Melissa stopped by Claire's house to pick up the coat Sophie had left behind, and saw David's email open on the computer screen. That night, they came to Claire's house like an intervention disguised as concern. Diane arrived first, her eyes already red as though she had cried on the way. Frank drove her, came in after her, hands in his coat pockets, his face hard to read. Melissa brought Sophie and Eli, though Claire heard her tell the children to sit in the living room and watch TV while the adults talked. Ryan arrived last, cold cigarette smell clinging to his jacket, anger already on his face before anyone began. Linda came after everyone else, and that was what made Claire feel colder. She walked in without hurry, placed her purse on a chair, looked around the kitchen as if inspecting a scene, then said, "I think it's best we talk tonight like adults." Claire stood in the kitchen, her wrist still hurting, watching each person enter the house that was supposed to be her place to recover, and saw it become a courtroom. Diane began with tears. "Are you going to abandon me?" Claire breathed in. "I was offered a job. In Columbus. Yes, that's 2 hours away, Claire. Melissa folded her arms. I don't know how you think this is supposed to work. Mom's appointments, the kids, Ryan, everything. Everything what? Claire asked, her voice low. Melissa looked at her, as if she had deliberately refused to understand. Life, family, Ryan laughed dryly. Right when everyone needs you most, you get promoted. Nice, Ryan, everyone always needs me most. Diane clutched a tissue in her hand. I'm not saying you can't live your life, but family has responsibilities too. I'm sick. Frank doesn't drive far at night. Melissa has 2 children. Ryan is trying to get stable. If you go, what are we supposed to do? Claire looked at her mother. Do you hear what you just said? No one has asked what this job means to me. You're all just asking how inconvenient it would be if I left. Frank said, practical as ever, you should think realistically. Your family is here. I'm here too, Claire replied. I've been here for 41 years. Melissa exhaled sharply. You act like you're the only one with a life. You think I'm not tired. I have 2 kids, a job, a useless ex-husband. But I don't run away. I'm not leaving to punish anyone. Sounds like it. Linda finally spoke, her voice so gentle it nearly sounded loving. Claire, I hear you, and I hear a lot of pain. But I also hear something dangerous. You're turning all of this into a story about everyone using you. So you don't have to see that you also like being needed. You have always been capable. Now that others need that capability, you're calling it a burden. Is that fair? The sentence struck the most shame-filled place inside Claire. Because yes, part of her had once liked being needed. Linda knew how to take one shard of truth and sharpen it into a knife. Diane cried harder. What did I do wrong to make you want to go so far from me? That sentence hit the child in Claire. The child standing on a chair making noodles. The child who wanted her mother to put a hand on her head and say, good girl. She almost broke. She almost said she wouldn't go. She was sorry. She had only been thinking about it. But from the living room, Sophie looked through the gap in the doorway, her eyes worried. And Claire remembered what the girl had said in the diner. Aunt Claire always says yes eventually. You just need to sound really stressed. Claire placed both hands on the edge of the kitchen table. I haven't made the final decision, but I will not let all of you decide by making me feel like the person who abandoned you. Ryan shook his head. Nice speech, but when I lose my car, when Mom misses appointments, when Melissa loses her job because no one can watch the kids, just remember this was your choice. Linda nodded slowly, as if Ryan had said something crude but necessary. Claire looked at her brother. No, those are the responsibilities of every adult in this room. For the first time, saying it did not make her feel strong. It made the house colder. They left after an hour, and no one hugged her. Diane left a crumpled tissue on the table. Melissa pulled Sophie toward the door. The girl looked back at Claire but did not dare run to her. Ryan shut the door hard enough to say what he did not dare say aloud. Frank nodded like he was ending a bad meeting. Linda was the last to leave. She stopped at the threshold and spoke softly so only Claire could hear. You can win an argument and still lose your family. Claire looked at her. Maybe I lost them a long time ago. I just kept working for them. Linda's face hardened for one very brief second. Then she smiled sadly. Bitterness doesn't suit you. Claire closed the door. The financial blow came from Ryan's car loan, and it was cruel not because of the amount, but because it showed Claire that even her name had become shared property in the eyes of her family. 2 days after the intervention, she received a call from the lending company asking about Ryan Morgan's overdue car payment, and saying that, as the reference who had confirmed contact, responsibility, and information guarantee, she needed to update his employment address. Claire thought she had misheard. After being transferred 3 times, after requesting copies of the documents, she discovered Ryan had used her electronic signature on a form far more complicated than the address verification he had mentioned. It did not fully make her a co-borrower, but it was enough to pull her name and credibility into the chain of contact. Enough that if he kept dodging them, she would be bothered, recorded in the file, forced to prove she was not responsible. She called Ryan immediately. He didn't answer. She drove to his apartment, a messy ground floor unit that smelled of old food, damp carpet, and pizza boxes. The TV screen lit up with a video game even though he said he was looking for work. Ryan opened the door, saw her face, and sighed. Now you're coming all the way over here. Claire held up the papers. You used my name on the loan. I told you it was just verification, not the way you said. You're overreacting. You let me sign something you didn't explain. Ryan scratched his head, annoyed. You always need everything to be perfect. I'm your brother. I didn't trick you. You lied to me. Because if I explained too much, you'd make it hard. I needed the car to get to work. You're not working. Because they're about to take my car. The sentence was so absurd that Claire stared at him for a few seconds without speaking. Then Frank appeared from the small kitchen, holding a cup of coffee. Claire had not known he was there. "Frank knew," she asked. Frank set the cup down. "Ryan needed the car. He was going to tell you later." "You knew he used my name?" Frank would not look directly at her. "You're good with paperwork. I figured if there was a problem, you could handle it." That sentence made Claire feel as if one final door inside her had closed. Not just reckless Ryan, not just overwhelmed Melissa, not just fragile Diane. Frank, the quiet one, the one who always claimed to be practical, also saw Claire's credibility as a tool in the family drawer. If it could be used, they used it. Claire looked at Ryan. "You're going to call the lender in front of me and correct the file." Ryan laughed bitterly. "Or what? You're going to sue me?" Claire was silent because the question rested on something he believed completely. Claire would never do anything that made the family look bad. "If I have to," she said. Ryan blinked. Frank looked up. The air in the apartment changed. Ryan said quietly, "You're crazy." Claire answered, "No. I just finally understand that you think being my brother is a license to use my name." She left the apartment with her legs shaking so badly she had to sit in her car for 10 minutes before driving. In things I thought were love, she added a new line. Ryan, car loan, financial credibility, Frank knew. Linda later texted, "Don't turn your brother's mistake into your own martyrdom." Did they ask if I was okay? No. Then she opened David's email and sent in the application. Diane's birthday dinner was where the truth was placed on the table, not because Claire wanted to choose the cruelest possible day, but because her family had chosen that day to press her back into her old role under candlelight cake, and the phrase, "family comes first." Diane was turning 65. Melissa hosted it at their mother's house, but Claire knew as soon as she walked in that everything had been arranged to look normal with too much effort. The floral tablecloth had been ironed flat. The cake sat in the center of the table. "Happy birthday, Mom," written in slightly crooked blue frosting. The smell of roast chicken, potatoes, and cranberry sauce made the house feel warm in the way family photographs pretend nothing is cracked outside the frame. Ryan wore a clean button-down shirt. Melissa had done her makeup carefully, and Frank had finally straightened the family photo on the wall for the first time in years. Linda arrived early, of course, and Claire understood at once that the dinner table had been arranged like a meeting, and Linda had set the agenda. Claire's chair was in its usual place, near the kitchen, but in front of it sat a small card Diane had written. "Family is where we come home." Claire looked at the words, then at Linda standing at the kitchen counter, stirring iced tea as if by accident. Sophie sat at the end of the table, quieter than usual, watching Claire with eyes that were both loving and afraid. Claire brought flowers and a stack of papers in her bag. She had hesitated for a long time before printing them. The night before, she had almost deleted the file, almost told herself she was going too far, that a birthday dinner was not the place for this, that her mother would be hurt, that good people did not place bills on a dinner table. But then Ryan texted, "You still haven't fixed the car loan thing with the lender. Don't make this tense on Mom's birthday." Melissa texted, "Please don't be cold today. Mom can't handle it." Diane texted, "I just want the whole family together. You're the one I count on most." Linda texted last, "Tomorrow is not the day for proving you are right. Some women realize too late that being right is not worth more than family." Claire read the 4 messages and realized they did not want peace. They wanted her back in a more usable shape. After the candles were blown out, Diane stood to say a few words. She held a glass of water, her voice trembling with real emotion. Claire did not doubt that her mother had feelings. That was what made it harder. "I just want to say that family is the most important thing. Money, work, everything out there can change, but family does not leave each other. I'm proud of all my children, and especially Claire, who always knows what this family needs." Linda placed her hand on Diane's shoulder and added in a smooth voice, "Claire is a rare kind of woman, the one who keeps the whole house standing. I only hope she remembers that sometimes being needed is not a burden, but proof that people trust you." Everyone looked at Claire. That gaze came again, the one that had been waiting at the dinner table her whole life. This time, Claire did not get up to fetch more water. She opened her bag, took out the stack of papers, and placed it on the table beside the birthday cake. The sound of paper touching wood made Sophie flinch slightly. Diane frowned. "What is that, honey?" Claire sat straight. "The things I used to think were love." No one spoke. She opened the first page. "These are Mom's medical appointments for the last 3 years. These are the vacation days I used to take her. These are the prescription bills I paid. when insurance didn't reimburse right away. This is the money I sent Ryan. This is the car loan with my name on it that was never explained to me. These are the days I watched Sophie and Eli. These are Frank's insurance papers. These are the messages everyone sent when they needed me. These are the things Aunt Linda texted every time I hesitated to remind me that saying no was selfish. Linda lifted her head very slowly. "Claire, no," Claire said, not loudly but firmly enough. "You don't get to name this for me anymore." Melissa reddened first. "You actually made a spreadsheet about your own family." Ryan laughed, but the laugh was hollow. "God, you really are your job." Diane placed a hand over her chest. "Claire, it's my birthday." "I know. You're humiliating me in front of the whole family." Claire looked at her mother. "No, I'm just done humiliating myself by calling being used love." Frank said lowly, "That's enough." Claire turned to him. "You've stayed silent my whole life and let me handle everything, so today you can listen." Melissa began to cry, but her tears were more anger than sorrow. "You think you're the only one who sacrificed. You don't have children. You don't understand how hard my life is." "That's true," Claire said. "I don't have children, but I became your backup plan for yours without anyone asking whether my life needed a backup plan too." Ryan pushed his chair back. "I'll pay you back. How much do you want? You want to make me look like a failure in front of everyone, right?" Claire looked at her brother, and for the first time, she did not rush to rescue him from his own sentence. "You called yourself that, not me." Linda stood, her face still composed, but her eyes cold now. "You are doing exactly what I feared. You are turning this family into a trial, turning your kindness into evidence against us. You think these papers tell the truth, but all they say is that you've started calculating where there should be love." Claire pulled one final page from the back of the stack. She had printed it at the last minute, after staring at the file until nearly dawn. The page had no totals, no charts, no long date column, only one title at the top. Times they asked whether Claire was okay. Beneath it was a table almost entirely blank. 3 lines had words: Sophie after volleyball practice, Maya office break room, Elena porch. The rest was empty, white boxes stretching almost to the bottom of the page like a room no one had ever entered. Claire placed that page beside the birthday cake, right below the words, "Happy birthday, Mom." The room fell silent in a different way. No one could laugh anymore. No one could immediately say she was calculating, because the emptiness was not loud, not insulting, not accusatory. It simply lay there, white and cold, impossible to argue against with tears. Diane stared at the page. Her lips trembled. "I love you," she said. But the sentence weakened beside all those empty boxes. Claire's throat hurt. This was where she almost broke, because she wanted her mother to say something else, wanted her to stand, hold her, say she was sorry she had not known. She saw her now. But Diane only looked at the papers, as if they were a betrayal. Claire spoke slowly, each word drawn from the deepest place inside her. "I'm not leaving because I stopped loving you. I'm leaving because you only love me when I'm still useful." The room was silent, not because they understood, because that sentence could not be immediately put back into its familiar frame. Sophie cried quietly, and Melissa pulled the girl closer as though Claire had hurt her. Diane sat down, her face pale. Frank looked out the window. Ryan went outside to smoke. Linda looked at the white page, then at Claire. "You will regret it when no one calls you anymore." Claire felt something inside her drop, not because of the threat, but because Linda truly thought that was punishment. No one calling, as if silence from people who only called when they needed something was the greatest loss. Claire gathered the papers, leaving one copy on the table, the white page still beside the cake. "I accepted the job in Columbus," she said. "I'm moving in 2 weeks." No one congratulated her. No one asked how much the salary was. No one asked if she was scared. Diane turned away, and Claire understood that the payoff was not their awakening. It was only the moment she said the truth loudly enough that even she could no longer pretend she had not heard it. The day Claire left, there was a light rain. Not the cinematic kind of rain that washes streets clean. Just thin, persistent Ohio rain that softened the corners of cardboard boxes and made hair stick to temp. Maya arrived at 8 in the morning with her SUV and 2 coffees, wearing an old hoodie, asking very few questions. Elena came over with a bag of ginger cookies and a blue wool scarf, saying, "Don't return it. A gift is not a loan." Claire laughed, then nearly cried because of that sentence. No one in her family came to help. Melissa texted at 9:12. "Hope the new job is worth losing your family." Ryan sent an angry emoji, then another text. "Don't expect me to ask you for anything again." Diane sent nothing. Frank sent nothing. Linda sent one final message, clean and cruel. When you get tired of having to love yourself, your family will still be here if you still know the way home. Claire read it and deleted it, not because it didn't hurt, but because she no longer wanted to keep every sentence as evidence in her pocket. Some things only needed to be understood once. Claire stood in the living room as it emptied around her, looking at the pale mark on the carpet where the sofa had been, the nail holes in the wall where family photos had been taken down, and felt something that was not relief. It was like having a painful tooth pulled after too long, only to discover the empty place in her mouth still hurt more than she expected. Around noon, while Maya was carrying a box of books to the car, Sophie ran over from across the street, her coat unzipped, her hair wet from the rain. "Mom doesn't know I came," the girl said out of breath. Claire set the box down immediately. "Sophie," the girl hugged her with both arms, so tightly that Claire's wrist hurt, but Claire did not pull away. "I didn't want you to leave without saying goodbye." Claire closed her eyes. "I didn't either." Sophie stepped back and pulled a folded piece of paper from her coat pocket. "I drew this." It was a small apartment, colored yellow, with a window, a potted plant, and a woman standing in the kitchen. Across the top, in a child's handwriting, were the words, "Aunt Claire's new home." Claire looked at the drawing until tears fell onto the paper. It was the first time in a very long time that someone had imagined her in a place where she was not rescuing anyone. Sophie said softly, "Mom says you're selfish, but I don't think so. I think you're tired." Claire hugged the girl again, without speaking badly of Melissa, without explaining herself the way adults often do to defend themselves. "Thank you for seeing me," she said. Sophie cried. Maya stood by the car and turned her face away to give them a little privacy. When Claire drove away from the house, she did not look in the mirror for too long. If she looked, she would see Sophie standing in the rain, the small house she had sold, the life that had held her with both love and rope. She kept driving. When the pillar left the house did not collapse immediately. At first, it only leaned, just enough for the people inside to say it was imaginary. Diane told Linda that Claire was going through a phase and would eventually remember what family meant. Linda told a few relatives that Claire had exhausted herself and was confusing boundaries with coldness. A sentence spoken with mournful dignity, so no one would hear that it was her way of framing the story before Claire ever had a chance to tell it. Ryan said he did not need anyone's help, especially not from someone who thought she was better than the whole family. Melissa said she would manage because, really, Claire had only helped with a few things. Frank said everything would be fine if everyone stayed calm. But life has a cold way of proving the value of invisible labor. Diane missed her first cardiology appointment because Melissa remembered the wrong date, and Frank assumed the hospital would send a reminder like a dentist's office. When Diane arrived late, they had to reschedule 6 weeks out. She got angry with Melissa, and Melissa snapped back that she could write down her own appointments. Ryan's car was repossessed on a Monday morning because Joey would not lend him any more money. He missed a job interview, then called Diane for cash. Diane called Melissa. Melissa said she didn't have any. Frank said it wasn't his problem. Frank filed the wrong insurance code, causing a reimbursement to be suspended. He sat at the computer for 2 hours, cursing the website, then blamed Claire because she organized these passwords too complicated. Melissa had to miss work twice because Sophie was sick and Eli had no one to pick him up. Her boss warned her that if her schedule kept falling apart, they would cut her shifts. And the consequences did not fall only on the adults. One Thursday afternoon, Sophie stood outside school for nearly 40 minutes after practice, the air so cold her ears turned red, her phone at 6% battery. Melissa was at the pharmacy with Diane, trying to get medicine but without the right insurance card. Frank was not answering, and Ryan said he had no car. Melissa finally arrived at the school with Diane in the passenger seat, the two of them arguing all the way home. Sophie sat in the back seat, clutching her backpack to her chest. "Can you put my schedule into an app?" the girl asked very quietly. Melissa was so tense she answered at once, "I'm not Aunt Claire with all her color-coded folders." The sentence slipped out, and then Melissa looked in the rearview mirror and saw Sophie's face close. She did not cry. Worse, she only looked out the window, as if she had learned another rule of the family. Responsibility was something adults hated, so they had once pushed it onto a woman who was no longer there. That evening, Sophie downloaded a free calendar app, entered volleyball practice, dentist appointments, her brother's birthday, and set reminders 1 day in advance. Melissa saw her daughter doing it at the kitchen table and started to say she didn't need to worry. But the sentence caught because both of them knew that if Sophie did not worry, maybe no one would. That is how a system passes to the next generation, not through lectures, but through the times children stand outside school gates waiting for adults to remember them. The first Thanksgiving without Claire turned into a chain of small collisions. No one knew how to stop. The turkey was dry because Diane forgot the timer. The mashed potatoes were too salty because Melissa was cooking while arguing with Ryan on the phone. Ryan arrived late and brought nothing, saying at the door, "I thought everyone said we were keeping it simple this year." Frank could not find the carving knife. Linda tried to hold the atmosphere together by saying, "Everyone has to learn to adapt." But even she did not know which tin box held Claire's cranberry sauce recipe. No one remembered that Diane hated canned green beans and bought the wrong kind anyway. No one knew the utility account passwords when the bill came due. Diane's doctor's number, the washing machine warranty papers, Sophie's tutoring schedule, or the name of the pharmacy employee who had always helped Claire straighten out the insurance. They had not only lost a helper, they had lost the invisible system that had allowed them to believe they were a functioning family. But instead of calling it Claire, at first they called it bad luck, busyness, a transition period, things being messy lately. People often prefer to find 10 other names before naming the person they have worn down. They came back to Claire when they needed her, not when they understood. The first call from Diane came after nearly 3 weeks of silence. Claire was in her Columbus apartment, sitting on the floor because the sofa had not been delivered yet, eating hot noodles from a bowl she had just bought. The window cracked open to let the cold air in. She saw her mother's name on the screen and froze. She let it ring 6 times before answering. Diane's voice was softer. "Are you okay?" Claire closed her eyes. The 2 words were so unfamiliar, she did not trust them right away. "I'm okay." Diane asked what the apartment was like, how work was going, but each question moved quickly, like someone passing through a hallway on the way to the real room. After 3 minutes, she said, "Frank messed up the insurance papers and I don't know who to call. Can you walk me through it a little? Not do all of it, just tell me what to click." Claire looked at the steam rising from her noodles. Inside her was a reflex to stand up and get her laptop, to say, "Hold on, Mom," to rescue the question, "Are you okay?" from being proven to be only a doorway into a request. But she said, "Call the number on the insurance card. They'll walk you through it." Diane went silent. "You know I'm not good at these things." "I know, but I'm not doing it for you anymore." Diane sighed. Not a wounded sigh, a disappointed one. "I'm only asking for a little help. It isn't a little if it is always me." After that, Ryan texted, "Can you help me get the car back? I swear I'll pay you." Claire did not answer. Melissa called crying because Sophie was sick. Eli needed to be picked up, and she couldn't manage everything. Claire listened, and her heart hurt for real, because Sophie had done nothing wrong. She told Melissa to call the doctor, call the children's father, call a neighbor, call emergency childcare if she had to. Melissa said, "I don't have money for that." Claire said, "I don't have my life to spend paying for what everyone else failed to plan." Melissa hung up. Linda called 2 days later, not asking about the apartment, not asking about the wrist, not asking about the job. "Are you teaching them a lesson by letting children suffer the consequences?" Claire stood in her new kitchen, looking at the rosemary plant on the windowsill. "No, I'm letting adults take responsibility before they turn Sophie into me." Linda was silent for 1 second. "That is a very cruel thing to say." "No," Claire replied, "it is a very late thing to say." She hung up before Linda could turn her answer into proof of bitterness. Claire sat in the new apartment, phone on the floor, dinner cooling. She did not feel victorious. She felt like someone learning not to put her hand into fire when other people said they were cold. She realized they missed her because consequences had begun to touch them, not because they had suddenly seen her sitting alone in the emergency room, not because they had read the white page beside Diane's birthday cake and stayed awake from regret. Their first reflex was still to recover her usefulness, and that completed the truth Claire had feared. When she was no longer there, they did not call her name like someone they had lost. They called the things she used to do. Diane came to Columbus on a late autumn afternoon, when the maple leaves outside Claire's apartment building had turned a dirty yellow and fallen in patches across the sidewalk. Claire knew her mother was coming because Diane texted a day before, her wording unusually careful. "I want to see you. I'm not asking for anything." Claire read the last sentence several times. "I'm not asking for anything." It sounded like a promise, and also like proof that asking had become so automatic it had to be denied. Claire's apartment still had very little furniture. A gray sofa, A small dining table for two, a bookshelf, a few unopened boxes because there were things she did not yet want to decide whether to keep. A rosemary plant on the windowsill like the one Sophie had drawn. Diane stepped inside, looked around, and her first sentence was, "It's so small." Claire felt the sentence cut lightly. "It's enough for me." Diane took off her coat and sat on the sofa, both hands holding her purse in her lap as if she were in a waiting room. Claire made tea. Diane watched her move around the small kitchen, perhaps seeing her daughter for the first time in a space not arranged around anyone else's need. "I don't know my way around here," Diane said. "It's so far." Claire placed a cup of tea in front of her. "You have GPS," Diane sighed. "You always make everything sound simple." They sat in silence for a while. Afternoon light fell over the wooden floor, the unopened boxes, Diane's hands speckled with age spots. Then Diane cried, not loudly. Tears slid down her face, like something that had been waiting a long time. "The house has been a mess since you left." Claire looked at her mother, and her heart hurt out of old habit. "I know, Ryan isn't okay. Melissa is angry with me. Frank gets everything wrong. Sophie is quieter. Thanksgiving." Oh, she shook her head. "It wasn't the same." Claire wrapped her hands around her cup. "Do you miss me, or do you miss the things I did?" Diane looked up. Her mouth opened, but no answer came right away. That silence was crueler than any accusation, because in that blank space, both of them heard the truth pass through. Diane loved Claire in her own way, but that love had been tied so tightly to usefulness that when asked to separate the two, she did not know which part could stand alone. Diane wiped her tears and said very softly, "I'm sore." Claire held her breath. For 1 second, the whole apartment seemed to hold still. Diane looked at her, lips trembling, and Claire saw something almost real coming. An apology imperfect, but maybe the first crack in the wall. But Diane's phone buzzed on the table. She looked down by reflex. A text from Frank appeared. "Ask Claire where the Medicare folder is. Linda says she knows." Diane picked up the phone, hesitated. Claire watched her hand. Diane put the phone down, then picked it up again. "I'm sorry," she said, but her eyes kept flicking toward the screen. "I wasn't going to ask, but Frank really doesn't know. And Linda said if we don't send it today." Claire felt the thing that had opened inside her close again very slowly, not loudly, not violently, just coldly. Diane realized it too. She set the phone down as though she had been caught, and fresh tears rose in her eyes. "I don't know how," she said, this time not as an apology but a confession. "I really don't know how if I can't ask you." Claire closed her eyes for 1 second. "That's the problem, Mom," Diane cried. "I'm your mother. Of course I love you. Then call me when you don't need anything. Ask me about work and listen to the answer. Visit without insulting the size of the apartment. Learn your own insurance number. Tell Ryan to pay for his own car. Tell Melissa my time is not cheaper than hers. Do those things not to prove anything to me, but because I cannot return to the old role." Diane looked into her tea. "You sound like a contract. Because when I speak like a daughter, everyone hears me like a service." The sentence made Diane cry again, but Claire did not get up to hold her right away. She felt cruel. She felt that she needed to be cruel to her own reflexes. At the end of the visit, she still walked her mother to the car, still reminded her to turn on the GPS before driving, still stood and watched the car leave the parking lot. But she did not run after it when Diane lowered the window and said, "Will you come home for Christmas?" Claire answered, "I don't know yet." Diane nodded, hurt. Claire let her be hurt, not because she had stopped loving her, because she had understood that her whole life had been used to prevent other people from having to feel that feeling. A year later, Claire had a new life, but it was not radiant the way stories make leaving sound easy. Columbus did not heal her. The new job did not hold her at night. The small apartment did not automatically become home, just because she placed a rosemary plant on the windowsill. Some mornings she woke at 5:30 because her body still thought it had to check Diane's appointment schedule. Some evenings after work, she picked up the phone to call Melissa because she missed Sophie, then set it down because she feared her sister's voice would carry a request. On some holidays, the family group chat was silent like a locked room, and that silence hurt more than she wanted to admit. Ryan did not apologize. Melissa only sent short messages about Sophie, sometimes with a photo of the girl receiving an award at school, sometimes not. Frank sent a Christmas card signed from him and Diane, Diane's handwriting shakier than before. Linda did not call much anymore, but sometimes she sent long emails saying family was not a contract, that one day Claire would understand no one lived alone without turning to stone. Claire read the first email, half read the second, then created a folder called Do Not Reply, and put all of them there. Diane sometimes called and truly asked questions, but there were still calls that slid back into old habits, and Claire had to learn to say, "You call them yourself, Mom," without hating herself. Maya visited once, looked around the apartment, said it was so quiet, then bought Claire a set of blue bowls. Eleanor sent handwritten letters in slanted script. "You don't need to feel light to know you moved in the right direction." Sophie sometimes video called just to talk about school, a new friend, a math test, a boy in class who liked showing off his shoes. The first time Sophie called without opening with, "Can you help me?" Claire sat on the sofa for a long time after the call, her hand on her chest. Real love sounded different. It did not always arrive with an emergency script. It could begin with, "I wanted to tell you something." One winter evening, Claire cooked dinner for herself, a simple chicken soup with carrots, celery, and buttered toast. She ate it while it was still hot, a small thing that had once been so rare it felt almost luxurious. Her phone lit up on the table, a text from Ryan. "Do you know the number for the furnace repair guy?" Claire looked at the screen. She knew it. Of course she knew it. The number was still in her contacts. Along with Diane's doctor, Sophie's school, the insurance company, the towing service, the pharmacy. An entire old life lived inside her phone, like a network of lines she had once operated. Her finger almost touched the screen by instinct. Then she stopped. She placed the phone face down on the table, lifted her spoon, and kept eating the hot dinner she had made for herself. Not angry, not shaking, not running to rescue anyone. Outside the window, snow fell lightly over the parking lot, covering strange cars, strange roofs. A strange city she was still learning how to live in. When Claire was there, they called her Obvious. When she left, they finally understood that Obvious was just another name for a pillar worn down day by day. But by the time they realized it, Claire had learned how not to stand in a house that only needed her when the roof began to cave in. She still loved them, in a way that hurt more and was less useful. But for the first time in her life, that love was not enough to make her betray herself.